Hey everyone, my name is Kris Barocsi and today we're checking out the brand new Synergy Marshall collaborational preamp module. This is the Marshall JMP for Synergy. If you know the brand Synergy, you know how they love to collaborate with the actual brands to create those preamp modules that they will then put in their sockets or actual amps, such as this one, the Syn 20IR, which on its own is a fairly new product. It came out this year. It's an amazing 20 watt amp with built-in IRs and load box and everything, and the socket for a 2-channel Synergy preamp module. I've been playing this amp and this exact rig for a couple of days now, actually a couple of weeks even. So I had time to get used to it, to kind of fall in love with it really, to figure out what kind of guitars work best with it, what kind of styles and sounds you should expect from it, and also what it doesn't do, or at least not to that extent as some other Synergy models or some other Marshall amps like the modded series, etc. We'll talk about all of that, but first, here is the intro track. This is how the Marshall JMP preamp module sounds like in a band mix. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy these videos. That would help me a lot. And check out the description box for timestamps and gear links and additional infos. You'll find my whole signal chain, of course, including the new Synergy Marshall JMP preamp module. It's a 2-channel preamp, really, with actual tubes, 12AX7s, etc. So you can just pop it in, tighten those screws, 2 Plexi channels, basically. Identical channels, where you can decide on certain settings and make them sound identical, just a little louder, like one a little louder than the other, which is really cool. But also you can make them sound radically different, of course, make one kind of clean, the other one nice and distorted. And before we get into the switches and the knobs on the JMP preamp module, I just want to give you some sounds because this thing loves single coils. This is actually the sound that I used for the rhythm setting in the intro track. This is how it sounds in isolation. The channels are identical, as mentioned before, and the first switch that you see is where you can decide on the clipping type or voicing, really. The 60s is the lower setting, 70s is the upper setting. The 60s is sweeter, warmer, less in your face, a little less gainy maybe, but it's not really just about the amount of gain, it's about the character of the sound. Then you have volume 2, which is the normal channel, the bassy channel, basically. And you have volume 1, which is the bright or treble channel. On the original Plexis, there, especially the treble channel, you are probably aware of that if you ever played one. On lower settings, it's really bright. Like, on its own, without the normal channel, it's way too bright. So you want to be really careful with how much you add from that to your sound to not sound extremely like piercy, especially with singing coils. A lot of people removed the bright cap from the treble channel to make it sound a bit more even and a bit more balanced and warmer. And the rest is fairly simple. You have bass, mids, and treble and master per channel. Now, master is of course interesting because it's a preamp module, so it's a master for that channel, not for the amp, because the amp itself, the Synergy Syn 20IR, also has a master on the right side of the amp, so that is going to be your master. And per channel you have volume master, or like a channel master. It's confusing a little bit. Let's see how clean the amp goes. As much as I love the cranked sounds of this amp, and we'll get there, don't worry, I think this edge of breakup and just over the edge, that sweet crunch is something that this amp does better than a lot of other amps. And this is the point where we have to talk about this rawness. If you ever played an actual old Marshall, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and you're not surprised to hear this. An amp that's about to explode. This is exactly the sound. Now, a lot of like multi-effects and like even when we're talking about captures or whatever, you know, models of an old Marshall, they usually polish things out. Like they make it sound so sweet and like perfect. Every time I hear that, I'm like, that's not how those amps sound like. That's how some of those amps got modded to sound like, and then got recorded in a way and then mixed in a way to sound as sweet and like as sort of polished, really. But that's that's a production of an album or a guitar sound. That's not the actual guitar sound. I'm really happy that they did not polish this one. They allowed a Plexi to just be a Plexi. Everything matters, and this is exactly the experience. If you polish this, you take out the soul. The second point that I think is really cool about all of these Synergy preamp modules is that you have an effects loop, because the power amp is not included in the sound creation or the gain structure. It's a modern circuit, which means that the drive comes from the preamp. And even if it sounds like it comes from the power amp, like in this case, which sounds like an amp that's cranked and is about to explode any moment, this is the sound of Plexis, but this creates that without overdriving the power amp, which means that you can have an effects loop, and you do have one. And then that issue that a lot of people have with old school Fender, Vox, Marshall amps, that they cannot use their reverbs or delays or chorus in an effects loop, is solved because it has a perfectly usable effects loop. And this is where I use the Galaxy by UFX for some reverb and tape delay. Now let's check it out with humbuckers. This is where things start to get real interesting. This is the gain fairly low, like volume 1 and 2, fairly low on the lower channel. And now, because I know some of you are just waiting for this the whole time, this is all the gain. Back off the gain a bit on the amp until it's tight, and then just boost the front end with something. So that's what I'll do. I'll use the Warm Audio Centavo in front of the 70s setting of the red channel, and we'll see how tight it gets. There's one more thing to talk about, and that's the cathode select function. Depending on what kind of Plexi sound you're going for, how much gain you want to use, you might want a different bass response, and with that, a different amount of tightness from your Plexi or Plexi style amp. So you can decide on having the most amount of bass hitting the whole circuit, medium, or the least amount. Now, the most amount will sound great, of course, if you have less gain and use a lot of singing coils and you want like the warmest, biggest sort of crunchy Marshall sound. A medium is a good compromise, and the least amount of low end is what you've heard throughout this whole video, because I like my guitar sounds as tight as possible. If I want it to be woolly and big, I'll turn on a fuzz pedal or whatever. So I am more that person who wants the least amount of low end going into the circuit. That's what you've heard right now. You can of course tailor that to your taste, your guitar, and your whole rig. Now, my thoughts on the Synergy Marshall JMP preamp module. It's a mouthful. This one sits in a very sweet spot because this is like as close to an original sound as possible, with a circuit that's as far from the original as possible, if you know what I mean. Like in the original amp, there's a reason for not having an effects loop. It's pointless. The power amp is just so saturated. This is the exact opposite. The power amp doesn't saturate at all. It all happens in the preamp, and it's voiced so authentically. It's insane and so beautiful. At low gain settings, very controlled, not piercy, not ice picky, not woolly. It's just the perfect amount of everything, and it's that sweet crunch. And then if you crank the gain or use humbuckers, you'll have that mid-range coming through, that Marshall mid-range that's just so recognizable. And also, it becomes a little raw. And of course, in a band mix, you will not hear a lot of that rawness because some of those frequencies are occupied by other instruments. I think it's just very important to understand that this is not your instant modded Plexi. It's not your Jose mod. This is the original, the OG, which means that it's raw, which means that if you want it to be tight, you need to know some tricks, right? You need to maybe put a pedal in front of it and dial back the gain a bit on the amp. Those things that you would do with the original is exactly what you should expect when using this. I needed a couple of minutes to get used to it, and as soon as I was there, I felt at home immediately, because it's a real freaking amp and not just a polished version of one. All right, let me know what you think about the JMP preamp. And of course, if you have any questions, anything that I forgot to mention, please hit me up in the comments below. I will come back to you. See you in another video. Bye-bye.